Welcome and good afternoon to this high-level conference on the recovery of the sports sector after the COVID-19 crisis. Today we're looking at the way ahead. I'm Brian Maguire. I'll be leading the moderation today. Now, just before we really kick off, let's go a quick look through the agenda. We'll be welcomed by Commissioner Maria Gabriel in just a few moments, and then we have a keynote speech by Thomas Bach, the President of the International Olympic Committee. We'll have some video testimonials from some of your esteemed colleagues, and then a panel discussion focused on the COVID crisis and the grassroots sports organisations. Then we'll have a second panel which will look at the sports impact and recovery from the COVID crisis. Just some notes on Slido, which you'll see on your screen. We invite you to use this particularly for the panel discussions. It's really just for the Q&A for the panel discussions, but you can send comments in advance. We won't be able to reply to them until the panel though. And you'll see the Slido tool appearing on the right-hand side of your screen. You can use it directly there or connect through your phone using the Slido app and use the code #X145 or by scanning the QR code on the left of the video. In order to identify who's sending the question, please give us your name and your organisation. And when you're using the tool also, if you want to direct a question to a person in particular, put their name in it and we'll try our best to direct it to them as well. So remember, that's particularly for the Q&A panel session. Now it's my particular privilege to welcome today Commissioner Maria Gabriel. She's the European Commissioner for Innovation, Research, Culture, Education and Youth. Commissioner, the floor is yours and very welcome.
Thank you very much. Honorable President Bach, dear ministers, members of the sport movement, dear friends, welcome and thank you for your presence today. It is an honor for me to open this conference that comes at a crucial time. After a relatively calm summer, we are now in the midst of the second wave of the COVID-19 outbreak. This means that once again, we are facing lockdowns, restrictions, and in the case of sport, cancellations of events and closures of fitness centers. Now, like in spring, and maybe even more than before, we need the power and the values of sport to cope with the situation, to come together, and more importantly, to use sport as an integral part of the solutions to this crisis. In a way, sport and physical activity have gained legitimacy and importance since the outbreak. This is an opportunity we should collectively seize. Beyond the economic contribution of the sector, its social role is being recognized. Today, ahead of the informal video conference of the Ministers of Sport and the adoption of the next European Work Plan for Sport for 2021-2024, we'll have the opportunity to discuss, on one side, the lessons learned from the crisis, and on the other, the impact on the sector and possible ways to recover. As announced at the last informal video conference of the Ministers of Sport, we launched a study to measure the economic impact of COVID-19 on the sports sector. Later today, I will be able to share with you the key findings of this study. This will also allow us to better focus our attention and our work where it is mostly needed. Because beyond COVID-19 and its impact, we need to look to the future. And as you all know, we are reaching the end of the current financial period. Although we are still in negotiations, I can tell you that in the next programming period, Erasmus Plus and its sports strand will be reinforced. As you have seen, last week, the European Parliament and the Council reached an agreement on the multi-annual financial framework 21-27, adding extra 2.2 billion euros to Erasmus+. This is an excellent news, and it will allow us to do more. In this respect, hearing from you is very important to me, because only if we work together as a team, we'll succeed in our goals. I'm therefore very glad to have the voice of both grassroots and competitive sport, athletes and organizers of major sport events, member states and the European Parliament, federations and associations. Later today, I will share with you some of our priorities for the future that also aim at strengthening our European model of sport. In a post-COVID-19 world, sport and its values will be needed more than ever. Together, we have to make sure sport has a central role in this world. Thank you very much and see you later.
Commissioner Gabriel, thank you so much for an excellent introduction. Yes, we'll see you later on. I overheard you say you'll be staying with us during the conference as well. So whatever you speak today will be heard by the Commissioner. Thank you very much. Now it's time for our keynote address. For today's keynote address, I'm delighted to introduce Thomas Bach. He's the President of the International Olympic Committee.
Dear Commissioner Gabriel, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, the fact that I can only greet you virtually is itself a reflection of the unprecedented situation we all are facing because of the global coronavirus crisis. I would like to thank Commissioner Maria Gabriel for inviting me to be a part of this discussion on the recovery of the sports sector in Europe after the COVID-19 crisis. While the crisis is far from over, we can see already now that sport is widely recognized as an essential factor in fighting the pandemic and as an integral part of the solution for the crisis recovery. We are all still learning every day. But I hope very much that the first lesson from this crisis we have already learned. We need more solidarity within societies and more solidarity among societies. Solidarity is at the heart of the Olympic Games, which unite the world in all our diversity. In these difficult times, we need these Olympic values more than ever. With these values, sport is ready to contribute to rebuild a more human-centered and inclusive society. Sport and physical activity contribute directly to physical and mental health and to combat non-communicable diseases. Sport can save lives. We have seen this over the last few months, in particular in times of lockdown, social distancing, and uncertainty. Sport plays a significant economic role. It creates jobs, generating business activity. In Europe, for example, research shows that sport contributes more than 2% to GDP, a contribution which makes sport economically more important than a number of more traditional economic sectors. Commissioner Gabriel, you summarized this contribution of sport in an excellent way when you said, and I quote, "The coronavirus crisis has highlighted the importance of sport for our societies, promoting not only the physical activity and well-being of EU citizens, but also contributing to Europe's economic development and social inclusion, as well as to major societal challenges." End of quote. For all these reasons, the IOC calls on the governments of the world to include sport in their post-corona support programs. This call was also echoed by the sports ministers of the 27 EU member states. The European Commission has also taken action to make its COVID-19 related resources available to EU member states to support the sports sector. I would like to thank Commissioner Gabriel for your personal commitment in this regard. Sport can only make this contribution to society if the values and solidarity-based model of sport is supported by the public authorities. This is why we need to strengthen the European sports model, its values and its robust solidarity funding mechanisms. The European sports model is something that we Europeans can really be proud of. It is a uniquely European approach to organized sports, reflecting the values of solidarity, of inclusion, and of peace. This European sport model reflects the specific organization of sport in Europe and its fundamental social and educational function. This unique model is built on solidarity and volunteers. It is based on the twin principles of financial solidarity, which allows revenues generated through events and activities at the elite level to be reinvested at the lower level, and of openness of competition, which gives priority to sporting merit. It is an approach that fully resonates with the social mission of the IOC, of making the world a better place through sport. This is why the IOC redistributes 90% of its revenue for the benefit of the athletes and for the development of sport worldwide, from the grassroots to the elite level. In hard figures, this means $5 billion in the 4 years of this Olympiad. Our money goes to the Olympic teams, consisting of the Olympic athletes. That means the national Olympic committees, who in turn support their national athletes and promote sport for all in communities across their countries. And it goes to the international federations to support the athletes and the development of their respective sport. In other words, we are also funding grassroots and volunteer structures, which is the foundation of the European sports model. In these difficult times, the values-driven European sport model can make a significant contribution to the recovery by mobilizing volunteers and by promoting more solidarity within communities, among countries, and also among popular and less popular sports. Without solidarity, clubs and associations at the base of the European sports model cannot survive, and the huge contribution they make to their communities and to elite sports will be lost. The coronavirus crisis had made it very clear. A strong European sport model is key to enable public authorities to deliver on their economic and social policy agenda in a post-coronavirus world. But unfortunately, we have to realize that this European sport model is under threat today. In fact, the very existence of the values, solidarity, and volunteer-based model is under threat, not only in Europe, but around the world. It is challenged by a purely profit-driven approach that ignores the intrinsic values and social mission of sport. It is under threat because the social mission of sports organizations is losing ground to the purely profit-oriented goals of commercial sports providers. It is my sincere hope and appeal that the public authorities, in particular in Europe, do not lose sight of the important social role of sport by equating it with commercial sports businesses. If everything is only looked at from a business perspective, if only the economic rules are applied to measure the impact of sport on society, then the social mission of sport is lost. This coronavirus crisis is already changing our world. Nobody should even dream of getting back to the way things were before the crisis. Even once we have finally overcome the health crisis, we will still face the far-reaching social, financial, economic and political consequences. This new world will need sport and its values. This is why the IOC is fully committed to continuing to promote the role of values-based sport in society. Thanks to the stability we enjoy, we do so not only with words, but with actions. Therefore, we will even strengthen our solidarity model, which benefits not just a few countries or a few sports. It benefits all the athletes from all 206 national Olympic committees, from the IOC Refugee Olympic Team, and from all Olympic sports, whether popular or less popular, thereby demonstrating our commitment to inclusivity and solidarity. We can do this thanks to the stability we enjoy, having secured Olympic Games hosts until 2028, and thanks to the loyalty and trust our commercial partners are demonstrating. For these reasons, we can even envisage increasing the Olympic solidarity budget. Beyond this solidarity aspect, the crisis has made it clearer than ever. Sport is the low-cost, high-impact tool par excellence for all countries in their recovery efforts. In the post-coronavirus world, where existing fault lines and inequities are likely to even deepen further, the unifying power of sport will have an even more significant role to play. While sport is contributing significantly already, delivering on the priorities of the European Commission requires unprecedented collective action from everyone. The sport community is ready to be a meaningful partner in this European effort, in particular with regard to the next EU work plan for sport. At least in some countries, this crisis has also accelerated the trend of diminishing trust in institutions and organizations. This also affects the IOC as a civil, non-governmental organization. We know that our ability to make a difference in the world rests on our credibility and integrity. For this reason, good governance is a central feature of Olympic Agenda 2020, our reform program for the Olympic movement. The IOC, as a values-based organization, has the double duty to uphold good governance and integrity in everything we do. This is why, through the Olympic Agenda 2020 reforms, We have turned the page and put in place a robust system of governance and transparency. We have established advanced control and risk management processes. Our accounts are audited at a much higher standard than legally required. Good governance is an area where we can build on ongoing cooperation. The EU Commission has already supported a number of good governance projects of the Olympic movement. The IOC has contributed to several EU expert groups on this topic. We very much welcome this dialogue and strongly believe that both sides can benefit greatly by even deepening our cooperation. The reason why I cannot join you live for this conference is because I'm in Tokyo at the moment. We are working at full speed with our Japanese partners and friends to make the postponed Olympic Games Tokyo 2020 a great demonstration of solidarity. Together with the Japanese government, the organizing committee, and many more, we are preparing for all 206 national Olympic committees to come together in a safe environment in Tokyo next year, to give a signal of hope and resilience to all humankind. In this way, the Olympic flame can be the light at the end of the dark tunnel we are all in at this moment. Very soon, we will celebrate this great Olympic spirit in Europe again. In 4 years, Paris will host the Olympic Games, and 2 years after, Milano Cortina will host the Olympic Winter Games. With the Olympic Games Paris 2024, we are going back to our roots and to the home country of our founder Pierre de Coubertin. Coubertin knew of the central importance of values for sport. He once said, and I quote, "Sport without values is only a military parade." End of quote. For once, I will dare to add to the words of my illustrious predecessor by saying that today, sport without values is just entertainment business. In this Olympic spirit, I wish you a fruitful discussion as you chart the way ahead.
Our thanks to Thomas Bach as an excellent overview of the state of sport globally, and also a reminder of the strength and resilience of Olympic values, and indeed the European values which we hold so dear as well. So thank you again for that, Thomas Bach. Now let's move to our first Slido poll today. You'll have to be quick off the mark with this. This will be 30 seconds for you to respond. And the question today you can see on your screen is: following the COVID-19 outbreak in spring 2020, do you practice sport more than before, less than before, or the same level as before, even though your gym has probably been closed down? So more than before, you can vote now. You have 30 seconds. More than before, less than before, and the same level as before. Those are your options. Just give you a moment to get organized there. You can start voting. We have today quite a lot of people online. We have 636 participants online today from 27 EU countries, and I'll see how many other countries we have globally. Somewhere over 50, close to 60, I think. We'll check that a little bit later on. So the polling is open, and just give you some more seconds for that. And we have another poll later on in case you didn't get the hang of it this time. And you can vote on the screen or using your app on your phone as well. Okay, let's close the poll, shall we? Okay, so voting's closed and the number's still moving a little bit. All right, so less than before. It seems to be the majority, even though we're still moving a little bit. And the same level as before, second, and more than before in the third category then as well. I think there are lessons to be drawn from this, which we're going to discuss during the conversation and discussion panels later on today. Polling, of course, is like a sport. Participation matters more than the winning. So if you weren't in the lead there, not to worry. And more of that later. There we go. Now, let's hear some testimonials about COVID-19 from your esteemed colleagues and how it's impacted the sports sector. Our first testimonial today is from Jean Gracia. He is the president of the cancelled Paris 2020 European Athletics competition, the championships. And Jean Gracia.
Bonjour. Let me thank the European Commission for inviting me to this conference. In normal times, I should have come today to share with you the fantastic European Athletics Championships in Paris, 82 years after the last edition in France in 1938. Unfortunately, the coronavirus has been here. These European Championships, originally scheduled for August 2020, would have launched the 33rd Olympiad towards the Paris 2024 Games and been a major sporting and popular celebration for thousands of athletes, spectators and viewers, journalists and volunteers. At the start of the year, the Paris 2020 team already comprised nearly 70 persons, and by the beginning of March, everything was under control with nearly 60% tickets already sold, discussions with Eurovision to ensure the best TV production quality, work in process with the City of Paris for the setup of magnificent competition venues at the Charletti Stadium, the Trocadero and the Eiffel Tower Gardens, and fruitful cooperation with relevant authorities concerning the security of the event. From the start of the pandemic, our team with French athletics and European athletics worked extremely hard on several scenarios. Driven by the desire to offer athletes from all over Europe an opportunity to express their talent, we studied all the issues and possibilities for safely staging the event. Implementing special activities linked to COVID-19, modification of the venues, cancellation of the half marathon and the mass race. Numerous meetings were organized with the national authorities in order to obtain their recommendations concerning the health situation and the possibility for 50 nations to join us. Unfortunately, all recommendations gave a clear message. The risks of staging the championships in August 2020 were simply too high. At the same time, the solution of postponing the championships by 1 year was also studied. However, the uncertainty of the total disappearance of the virus and the discovery of a vaccine, the French, European and world economic situation, the density of the 2021 international calendar, and the additional financial costs linked to the postponement did not allow us to calmly think of a postponement. After all the analysis, the Paris 2020 board made the responsible choice and decided to cancel the organization of the European Championships in 2020. This difficult decision was for us a way to contribute to the fight against the virus by avoiding large groups of people from around Europe coming together and potentially spreading the infection. On another side, our discussions with the European Commission enable us to continue our Erasmus Plus project called European Volunteers and Active Citizens, and this despite the cancellation of the championships, by modifying and adapting the concept. At the time of the cancellation, nearly 1,200 volunteers had been selected and partially prepared after a long process of recruitment. It seemed essential to us to make something valuable out of the opportunity we had created. Even in the difficult sanitary context, a big majority of the selected volunteers accepted to continue, and they participated in several activities like the e-forum dedicated to the young leaders in August, the gathering of 250 persons face-to-face and 300 through video conference in October. As you can imagine, we were not prepared for that situation, and the risk assessments which were done earlier were not mentioning at all this kind of threat. Under these conditions, we have tried our best for the sport, but most important, for the health of everybody. Thanks a lot for your attention.
John Gracia, thank you so much for your sterling work and how you've continued to make the most of an incredibly difficult situation, particularly with young participants, and great expectations for the future as well. So thank you for that, and best wishes. Our next testimonial comes from Gerd Kanter, the chair of the EAC Athletes Commission. Gerd Kanter he won 11 medals discus at the Olympic level, World and European Championship level. So let's hear from Gerd Kanter.
The COVID-19 pandemic has changed many athletes' sporting careers. Issues the pandemic raised were how to train effectively, how to keep your motivation, how to manage mental health, or how to fund your sporting career. 2020 is supposed to be Olympic year. A direct impact was made on athletes who have trained for 2020 Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games for a long time. For some, the announcement of postponement automatically meant retirement and eternal loss of opportunity. For others, however, a postponement merely indicates the shift of timing and adjustment to optimize their peak, so they can use as an extended chance to further improve their performance or recover from injuries they might have endured. The spread of COVID-19 forced nearly every training location to shut down, but also forced athletes to stay home. Social distancing was only medicine that was stopping the spread of virus, but it also put it on hold or cancellation many European major sporting events or qualification tournaments. European Athletics Championships, Euro Football 2020, Wimbledon are just from the top of Europeans' list. These changes have increased the sense of uncertainty, confusion, and frustration, and has made it difficult for athletes to set a series of concrete goals. We all know how economy is suffering due to pandemic. Same has happened with athletes' income. Very often athletes' contracts are related to their performances. 2020 has given very limited options to perform. Many professional leagues were cancelled. Even though some events were happening, it was without spectators, so all revenues are drastically dropped. But these revenues were main source of athletes' income. In addition, it has pointed out that COVID-19 pandemic has increased concerns for doping. Due to this pandemic, tests have been temporarily paused in many cases, giving some athletes the chance to consider trying performance and chasing drugs, which in turn increased the anxiety and doubt for the other competitive athletes who refrain from doping. Furthermore, some athletes are concerned how medications they may need to take if they get infected by COVID-19 will be detected and judged due to lack of reliable information. For conclusion, I can say that the second wave of COVID-19 is raising its head in Europe, and sky is still cloudy, but athletes are fighters in their souls, and they believe brighter tomorrow. We're hoping that vaccine will be ready soon. Best way out is to still keep your motivation high and walk forward with positive mind, whatever is coming. Thank you.
Gerd Cantor, thank you so much for a really spectacular presentation of what needs to be kept in mind, that there are brighter days ahead. Thank you so much also for raising some issues which perhaps most of us would not have considered, the complexity of dealing with doping and the wider athletic community. So to Gerd and to Jean, thank you so much for clarifying these elements of your testimonials today. I've travelled a vast distance to the other side of the studio here with our new backdrop. So we're going to kick off the discussion panel now. So the first panel is focused on grassroots and where the key challenges and lessons learned from the crisis for grassroots sports organisation. That's really what we're going to take a look at now. Let me introduce our panel guest speakers. By the way, you can start sending your questions any moment now to Slido, and we'll address these to our panelists as we go through. We're going to ask each of our panelists to do 60 seconds. We're going to introduce the whole panel just first. So we have Anna-Kaisa Pusa. She's the mayor of Kurka in Finland. Anna-Kaisa, great to see you. We have Julian Ziebelstein. He's the Chief of Governance and Stakeholder Affairs at UEFA. Great to see you, Julian. Mark Tarabella, member of the European Parliament and co-chair of the European Parliament Sports Group. And just logged on there as well, I believe, is Stefan Meyer. He's the Parliamentary Secretary of State for the German presidency. Great to have you all with us as well. I just give Stefan a moment to get organised there. Anna-Kaisa, your 60 seconds, your elevator pitch.
Dear Commissioner, dear all your friends, so the city of Kurikkala gives service voucher for instructed strength training for citizens over 65 years old twice a week. So we have personal trainers for seniors for target-oriented training, and it has been very effective. But because of the pandemic, the situation has changed. So we need to find new ways how to do the training with distances, good hand hygiene, masks, and so on. So this is a very important issue because elderly people is aging in Europe and aging in Finland. So we have had very good results for this training in chair test and VAS pain scale. So we need to find a new way. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna-Kaisa. Let's try and find a new way this afternoon, and we'll talk a bit about that project later on as well. Julian Ziebelstein, 60 seconds, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brian. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the European Commission for its invitation, and particularly to Commissioner Gabriel for initiative and for giving UEFA the opportunity to address all of you together with my distinguished fellow panelists. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be here today because within my role to UEFA, I've had the honor and the pleasure of working with many of you over the past few years as part of the strong partnership and track record that UEFA has with the European Union and the member states. But I think that it has probably never been as important as it is today to discuss and work together as natural partners. And it has never been so vital that we focus on the grassroots. What I mean by this is that there is usually a big focus on iconic elite competitions like the UEFA Champions League. And it's also true that the professional sports sector is facing an existential risk as a result of this ongoing crisis. But today we want to use the opportunity of this panel to stress that grassroots football is a vital part of UEFA's mission. We are the steward of European football, and therefore we have a social duty to ensure that everybody, everywhere, has the opportunity to play football in a safe and quality control environment. So all this to say that I look forward to today's discussion, and thank you once again for the opportunity to be here with all of you today.
Good to have you with us today, Julian. Excellent. Stefan, 60 seconds, sir. Stefan Meyer. You're on mute, I think.
Okay, now it works.
Thank you very much. Very briefly, I'm convinced, especially the grassroots sports in Germany was affected very severely by the COVID-19 pandemic. we have more than 90,000 sports clubs in Germany, and certainly they suffer a lot. And all the members, and I would say for especially the youth, now only school sport and elite sport is possible. So I'm deeply convinced that this year is very difficult for all the volunteers in the more than 90,000 sports clubs. But the next year, I would assume, is becoming even more complicated. So I fear that the financial damage will be tremendous, especially next year. So all the 16 states which are in Germany, which are responsible for supporting the grassroots sports, do a lot in order to help the sports clubs. We, as the Federal Ministry for the Interior, on the federal level, are responsible for elite sports. And fortunately, we were able to form a known program for the professional and for the semi-professional sports clubs. But I would say, as I said, the next year will be more difficult, and it's more the challenging than this year is already.
Stefan Meyer, thank you so much. Mark Tarabella, 60 seconds, sir.
60 seconds. I have the privilege to speak today and to be with you as a co-chair, as you mentioned, of the intergroup, the sports group of the European Parliament. But I'm also mayor of a small commune for 1,000 people here in Belgium. And I think that sports is affected by the COVID, and we have to think to post-COVID. Sport is affected. High-level sport, of course, but also grassroots, and it's our main topic. But I think that one cannot live without the other. And I think that each at our level, at the European level, but also business, and we have to help. And at the local level, probably to reinforce the support to sports activity, because it's a need for a balanced society. You know, I appreciate to speak about sports, physical activities. Eat well, drink well. It means water, of course, not only, but today is water. And I think that this magic alliance that we have to reinforce, taking into the lessons of the COVID and for the post-COVID.
Thank you, Mark. You're the first Belgian I've seen in television drinking water and not your local brew.
Not beer.
Okay. Stefan, I want to kick off with you on this as well. Look, you took over the presidency this year full of optimism, and it didn't quite work out that way. You had your plans squashed a little bit. What lessons have you really learned from this in terms of dealing with sport through the German presidency? What had to change?
My impression is that you always have to make the best out of it. So certainly it was not possible to organize and to conduct the European Week of Sports in September in a physical way, but at least it was possible to organize a starting conference, starting event, and a lot of sports clubs, especially in Frankfurt and in the area of Frankfurt, took part in this European Week of Sports and Be Active initiative. So I'm quite glad that now in the forefront of the informal council meeting of the ministers for sports on the 1st of December, it was possible to conduct the negotiations of the EU sports work plan for the next 3 years from 2021 to 2024. And so certainly it's a tremendous challenge now for all of us, especially, as I mentioned, for the volunteers in sports, for the sports clubs, but also certainly for the high performance athletes and the coaches and so on. But I'm deeply convinced if you support sport on the national level, on the regional level, it will be possible that the recovery will be gorgeous, and that I would say that our structures, our well-formed structures with assisting especially grassroots sports will survive this tremendous.
Thank you. Mark Tarabella, you straddle some different strands here as well. So the European Parliament and you're also the local mayor. So you see both sides, the transnational European approach and also your very local level too. Are you encouraged by the sports plan and how Europe has managed with the COVID crisis? And are we going to miss the grassroots? Or are we just going to focus on high-level achievers, high-level sportsmen and women? Is you on mute, Mark? On mute. Mark, can you switch your microphone on? Thank you.
Yes. Sorry.
Good to hear you.
No, I would like to say that, of course, sports as other sector of activities is impacted, very heavily impacted by the COVID crisis. And of course, we have to think that and to, of course, to listen to what they say, the difficulty to have activities. What about some indoors activities not allowed for the moment? It's also difficult for high-level sport, and I listen to what said Mr. Bach and the athletes for the Olympic Games, for the UEFA Championship, of course, for the Champions of Football, and all competition without public. It's difficult for each one, and I think that we have to think how to reinforce sport, and that for the grassroots is very important, because I think it's some sports on the grassroots level are in difficulties, and were in difficulties before the COVID crisis. Because you know that they depend from voluntary people, and there is a lack of voluntary people for the grassroots sports. Another issue, the sponsor of a small football team or basketball team in a village is not the main sponsor that we see on the shirt of the champions. Generally, online gambling company, very rich. But it's the shop of the corner of the street, and they have difficulties also because they are closed. And probably the first expenditure that they will not provide in the future is the sponsor to the sports club of the village, because they are also under threat. So that when the people have difficulty,
yes,
they come to the mayor, they come to the city, people that they know. And I think that it's a huge challenge. Of course, some governments.
Well, let me ask Julian about this then. Julian, you work at the grassroots, but you're also working at the big player level in football as well. What is football doing to get by right now, and what are you doing for grassroots?
Well, where to begin? I think it's fair to say that this has definitely been the most challenging period in our history, because as you can imagine, we had to deal with challenges like never before, and these have affected football at all levels, as you said, Brian, not only professional but also the grassroots. And also UEFA, as the governing body of European football, also as a competition organizer. We had to postpone and cancel competitions. We had to adapt to tournament formats. We had to make changes to the rules of the game. We had to ensure financial support. We had to manage, funds and make sure that people are kept safe while the public health effort was supported. And also we had to help to ensure that opportunities remain possible for people to play and enjoy football. It was no small task, and you also face the same challenges at professional level, where the strain is also really big, and the impact will be long-lasting. And I think it is really important for everyone to understand that the loss of broadcasting, sponsorship, and ticketing revenue is a major issue, and it will continue to affect all clubs in the future, big, medium, and small.
Do you think it will come back quickly? Do you think that once we get into a large-scale vaccination program where people have confidence to go back, where governments allow people to go back onto the playing fields, will this rebound quickly, or are we looking at a lag which is going to last maybe until 2024? I heard one commentator speak on CNN last night.
Well, it's a bit early to say, Brian. Some estimates suggest today that European clubs are looking at a revenue decrease of approximately 5 billion euros in the next few years. So whatever happens in the near future, and hopefully it will come sooner rather than later, there will be a lot of distance to be covered for the professional football to get back to where it used to be before the pandemic.
Okay, we have lots of questions coming in.
Level,
sure, go ahead.
Yeah, also grassroots level, because UEFA is not only, as I said at the beginning, the iconic elite competitions, but we also have a responsibility to ensure the sustainable development of grassroots football competitions and activities. It has been difficult at this level as well to comply with all the emergency health measures, and in normal circumstances it is already challenging to ensure the continuity of sporting activities at grassroots level. And well, here the fact is that our job has not been facilitated by the widespread uncertainty of all the measures applicable at national level. And in many contexts, especially the smaller ones, there is the inability to bear operating costs on clubs, and this will have already is having a devastating impact on amateur sports clubs.
Thank you. We'll come back to that in just a moment as well. Mark mentioned this too. So on Slido, please keep sending in your questions. I'm going to come to those in just a moment. Right now, I want to ask Anna-Kaisa. Anna-Kaisa, grassroots for you maybe means something different than UEFA perhaps. And one of the programs that you launched was to help elderly people stay fit during the COVID crisis. Well, tell us a bit more about that. You're on mute. Please unmute. Microphone.
Yes, because aging population, we feel that preventive healthcare, it's very important to keep fit also the senior citizens, because it's finger research that shows that muscle training is very effective and prevent your dementia, for example. And that's why we do this. And now, of course, this pandemic, we have doing training outdoors. So, for example, orienteering and mountain biking has been in Finland very popular, but it doesn't solve the problems with our citizens over 65 years old. So we have been planning this affects, for example, that we would have special schedule for them for training, and this hand hygiene and this kind of advices that they could train safely, because it shows in the measurements that they really need the gym training to keep them fit and to have good well-being. So the younger people can do distance education, distance training, and they will survive with this kind of esports solutions. But for the elderly people or the senior citizens, we really need the gym that where they could go.
Thank you. Mark Tarabella. Mark, you mentioned about the holistic approach that sport brings as well. Most people, when they talk about sport, they're really focused on football and big name games all the time. But for most people, that's not what they participate in. It's going to gym, and depending on what age group you're in as well. Has our attitude to sport changed because of COVID? Are we now seeing sport not just as recreation, not just as something to get fit, lose a bit of weight, but actually it's intrinsic to how we function as an individual and everything that we do? Has this changed?
Yeah, it changed a little bit, and I'm in touch with some young people in my village, for example, and not only in my village, discussing with other colleague mayors. One sport becoming popular is cycling. Cycling on the roads, but also in the woods. And for example, the shops, the seller of cycling are empty now, because many people wanted to buy, and many families, and to cycle and family on Sunday and sport. And it was a unique way for young people with the not allowed to go to school before the summer break. They've been to the woods and to the fields with a bicycle, but also running, jogging, and there are sports now, and they took the attitude to go to the sport, to practice the sport, and now they continue and probably after COVID, they will continue. And
But let me ask you, Mark. Do you think they will
opportunity.
continue? Do you think they will continue? Because our tendency is to lapse back into the everyday format that we had before. Work takes its pressure. You're up early, you go to bed late, and we have additional patterns of changing behaviour for working at home now as well. You're working longer hours instead of shorter hours. What role does government have to do this? Let me ask Stefan Meyer as well. Have the attitudes changed sufficiently, Stefan, that we can begin to build new policies for sport, which is focused not just on entertainment or the business of it, as we heard earlier, but on well-being for individuals and for society? Stefan?
I'm deeply convinced that certainly the way we do sports changes, and as it was mentioned by my colleague, it's completely right. I'm very glad that, especially until now, it wasn't necessary in Germany to prohibit individual physical activity. So certainly the cycle shops, they are one of the big winners of this COVID-19 pandemic. So cycling is very popular in Germany, jogging, as it was mentioned, and certainly on the one hand, the suspension of sports conducted in groups is really a harm, but on the other hand, I'm quite convinced that there is also a chance for other sports. For instance, tennis. Tennis had a really big crisis within the last years in Germany. At least we had the Becker and Steffi Graf boom in the beginning of the 90s or in the end of the 80s, and the number of active tennis players declined a lot within the last years. And now there is an increase because it was possible to play tennis and golf, for instance, as well, very early in the beginning of the pandemic. So, and I'm quite optimistic that those who started now to play tennis, to do jogging, to do cycling, they would not quit at the end of the.
We have a question exactly on this. Let me put this to Julian. So from Professor Steve Huck from Sheffield Hallam University, and your former MP now works for Facebook apparently as well. In the first wave of COVID-19 in March, he says, physical exercise and sport discussed by most governments as being for physical and mental health. In the second wave, this message appears to have been lost. What can we do about this? Julian, you share this perception? What do you think government can do to revitalise this narrative?
The physical education, in particular, generally speaking.
Yes, physical and mental health was the focus of sports messaging from governments in the first wave, and now he says this has been lost during the second wave. What can we do to improve this?
Well, there is definitely a lot that public policy makers can do at all levels, be it at European level, national level. What is probably missing is a certain degree of coordination between the responses that can be given by public authorities at European level and what can be done at a more local level. And this applies to promoting education, but it also applies to other elements of public health policy, but also other elements of sports policy, generally speaking. So I guess that this is an easy area, or this is one of these obvious areas where the European Union, where European authorities and where national level have perhaps more of a duty to coordinate more the results they want to achieve and the areas of focus.
Thank you. We have lots of questions coming in now. We're going to try and work through some of these now. I can't guarantee we'll be able to do all of them, but please send your questions, and our moderator for Slido will push some of these to the top for me as well. Next question is from Michael Viggers. Mark Tarabella, maybe you want to take this one. Do you think grassroots sport should be integrated with national public health frameworks to help reduce the burden and prevalence of non-communicable diseases and tackle health inequalities? Microphone, Mark.
Yes. at the beginning, I spoke between the alliance between eat well, drink well, and activities. I think it's the best way to tackle some diseases, and the prevention probably is very important, and to include more activities for all ages, for young people, but also for old people. In France, the Ciel Bleu promoted a few years ago the physical activity in the home for old people, and they became better, feel better without medicine, less medicine. And I think that's for all age we have to promote the physical activity. It's a benefit for all, and a lack and decreasing of consumption of medicine. Clear. And it's a question also of social health care and the cost, and diminish the cost of that.
Mark, you know very well the linkage between cardiac disease, obesity, and mental health issues, and unhealthy aging, and the cost of unhealthy aging as well. You know, should we not have this sport front and center for health and well-being, not just as a matter of how we feel about ourselves, but you know, we can't invest more in health budgets necessarily without huge tax increases, but we can save, like you say, the reduction of medicines, the improvement of overall lifestyle as well. You know, does government need to put sport on a much higher footing for the benefit of health economics, if for no other reason?
Yes, we have to share the best practices. I think that sport, for example, for young people is more popular in Germany, maybe in Holland, than in other countries. In other countries where sport is not so pushed. In my country, in Belgium, I think that in Flanders they are more to push the sport at school with the infrastructure than in Wallonia. And I think that we have to do effort to integrate more sports, and also at school, because everybody is obliged to go to school before 18 years, to be 18 years old. So that school is the crossroads for all people. And I think that's important to encourage that, because mens sana in corpore sano.
Okay, thank you. And let's a quick answer to that also for Anna Kaiser. Then another question for Julian. Anna Kaiser, you know, you spoke about elderly in your community. What about the young people as well? Is there a strong enough emphasis on sport for young people as a means of disease prevention as well? And not just young people, sort of healthy middle-aged people.
Yes, people in all ages, of course. And we have been discussing a lot in our city as well about this, our children and younger people, and about the obesity problem as well, that they need advice about a good food and good training, and with a positive way. So we try to do that as well in our schools and in our education system we have. And we try to start it when they are young, and because they regularly go to the nursing sister, so we try to give advices to the families as well to eat well and train well. So that's true. Thank you.
Annika. I was at a conference last year in Bucharest on healthy aging, and cardiac specialists and neurological specialists, they emphasized 6 years old, you've got to begin this healthy approach and embedding sports and healthy living from that age as well. Julian, something along this theme is a question from Alma Papic from NOC of Croatia. Alma says, UEFA is investing in football infrastructure across Europe to make it more accessible to communities and sports clubs. Would you agree that accessibility of sports facilities is directly related to people's health, and as such should become eligible under EU funding rules? Interesting question. Julian.
It is. Well, this is again why I think this is exactly actually where we need public authorities at national and European level to work hand in hand with the sports movements, so that we can find new ways of supporting grassroots football and perhaps enhance also accessibility to public infrastructures. As far as we are concerned, we run a very ambitious solidarity fund, Hat-Trick, which enables to ensure the continuity and the development of football at grassroots level, and to also improve accessibility to facilities. But we also hope that precisely about that, there will be more efforts that will be made by European decision makers, not only with Erasmus Plus to allocate more funding to sports facilities, generally speaking, but also on other sorts of funding, such as the structural fund.
Okay, thank you.
It proved to be crucial in the long term.
Thank you. Stefan, on this as well, how much do you think infrastructure matters in terms of health and well-being? And should the European Union be doing more to assist the establishment of better infrastructure for sport across Europe?
I'm deeply convinced that infrastructure is very, very essential. We made the experience that in those towns, in those cities, which the sports infrastructure lacks, the awareness is different, and especially the motivation and the numbers of those who are active is much lower than in those areas or in those regions in which the sports infrastructure is quite okay and quite proper. So we now start to invest as a federal government with no regard to the responsibility, because the responsibility is in the hand of the 16 states to support the communalities with regard to improving their sports infrastructure. So we start to invest in this year about 150 million euros, and we will continue this program next year and in the next years. And certainly it's considerable if this is also a topic for the European Union. But to be honest, I'm quite convinced that the responsibility in the first hand is in the hand of the member states and the regions. So for us, it's very important to emphasize on the European level more on the cross-sectoral discussion of sports, but I wouldn't demand a known investment program on the European level for sports clubs and for the sports infrastructure.
Okay. Thank you, that's clear. Mark Tarabella, same approach, but also the European Union doesn't have jurisdiction over Europe's health policy either, but it can do a lot to support that, benchmarking and supporting infrastructure as well. So to your mind, how important is infrastructure in supporting sports and health in Europe? And can Europe do more to support that?
Yes, infrastructure is the competence of all national authorities or region or cities, and certainly I think less Europe. But I agree also, and thanks Maria Gabriel to be very involved in the sport, because sports at the European level we discussed before, less than now. For example, in the Parliament we have a project. You don't see the resolution. It's the draft resolution that we discussed on sport and the impact post-COVID on sport and youth, and it will be discussed in the coming days. It means that sport is an increasing importance. But for the infrastructure, maybe it depends how the member state could expand the amount that they will receive. Because now the budget is increasing. We have a 750 billion euro for the coming years to compensate and to relaunch the economy after the post-COVID. And probably also we have to be careful to invest also in sport, not only in some economic key sector, but sport is a key sector also, and we have to be careful to that, to allow an expenditure in the infrastructure on sport.
Thank you. Another question. Let's see. Cormac MacDonald, I think that's a fairly Irish name from my homeland. Do we need to rethink how sport and physical activity is offered and managed at grassroots level post-pandemic, perhaps with a more inclusive, collaborative and community focus? Does the EU sport delivery model need to adjust and pivot to meet new needs in society? Anna-Kaisa, do you think the sports delivery model needs to change, it needs to pivot to meet new needs in society? Anna-Kaisa.
Yes, now you hear me. Thank you. Yes, I need the cities and municipalities should invest in sporting outdoors abilities or outdoors places, or invest in that kind of places where we all can train and do things. And it's important for all ages. And I think we find new esports methods for all ages as well. But I think that all ages citizens' well-being, we have to do this kind of grassroots investments and have it very target-oriented as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Julian, same question. Do you think the sports model needs to change because of what's happened, because of how society has begun to view community, health, and the responsibility of government?
I'm not sure that the European sports model has to be changed. Probably quite the reverse. I think that it should be strengthened to make sure that its positive values and the many benefits that it delivers are nurtured. And on this, I would very much echo what has been said already by the president of the International Olympic Committee in this regard. So yes. I hope that the perspective is more for all relevant actors and stakeholders to work hand in hand to indeed protect and reinforce the European sports model, which is underpinned by financial solidarity, open competitions, a very strong grassroots base, this culture of volunteering, and many other values.
Okay, thank you. Stefan, question from Jacqueline Cronenberg. Jacqueline asks, is this COVID-19 crisis the social return on investment in sports and physical activity? Could it be much higher than it already was? And don't you think? And she's in the Netherlands, where every €1 invested has a societal return of about 2.5 euros. Shouldn't we promote the societal return on investment more instead of just focusing on the costs?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Certainly, the benefit of investing in sport is tremendously high, and it's underestimated. I'm deeply convinced still. So I'm especially with regard to improving the well-being, improving the status of health, especially for elderly ones. It's very important to invest more in sports and certainly in all the different areas and sectors. I mentioned already the sports infrastructure. It's very essential. There are surveys in Germany which outline that the need for investments in sports facilities is about 30 billion euros. That's really a tremendous high amount. So, and certainly we need more investment in physical prevention and health prevention. That's certainly for the sake of all of us. So I only can underline and push forward this idea.
Thank you. We're going to take two more questions on Slido, and then we're going to talk a little bit shortly about resilience as well. And this question was from Sarah Massini from ENGSO. I'm not going to try and pronounce that. And it's from Mark Tarabella and Stefan Meyer. Let's give it to Mark this time. So the question to Mark Tarabella is, what have you done to ensure the sport is eligible? And let's put this in as you as the European Parliament. What has the European Parliament done to ensure the sport is eligible for EU recovery funds? And what will be the outcome? How can we ensure those resources go to the grassroots level? Mark.
I'm not sure that I understand very well the question.
Okay. In terms of the EU recovery funds, for the COVID recovery funds, what has the European Parliament done to support grassroots deployment of those resources for sport, if anything?
Just it's the actuality. With this resolution, we have to be careful to not forget the sports in the investment that will be allowed for all countries in Europe. And I think that to promote that, for example, the Parliament, and Maria Gabriel mentioned in the beginning for the remarks, opening remarks, that there is 2.2 billion more for the European budget, it's thanks to the Parliament, not the Council, not the government. It's thanks to the Parliament. And I think that we are careful to that. And for the investment, probably, we have an intergroup co-signed by 120 colleagues from several groups and all countries in Europe, to be careful to allow to invest in sports in the future. Because as mentioned just before, when we invest in sport, it's very profitable for all society. Not only on economic point of view, but also social, healthcare, and diminution of the cost of healthcare. And I think that we have to be careful to that. We have to, in the negotiation between the Council, we have to push always and to be careful. It's one of the reasons of the intergroup on sport, because we don't have a specific committee on sport in the European Parliament. We have 20 committees, not on sport. It's for the reason that we have a Eurogroup on sport in the European Parliament.
Okay, thank you, Mark. And there's a question for Anna Kaiser, then I want to ask Julian about resilience as well. So Brigitte Kervinen, she said to Mayor Anna Kaiser Pusa, what kind of role does grassroots sport, what kind of role do grassroots sport clubs play in the city of Kurica?
They play a very important role, and the city gives economical support in some of the clubs, and then we have some kind of cooperation projects. So it's very important to us, this voluntary work they are doing, and we have very close connection and very close discussions always, that they have good abilities to work with the citizens and inhabitants in the city. So they are very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Julian, just quickly, on resilience, what does resilience mean to you in the context of sport and grassroots recovery right now?
Resilience means probably, first and foremost, unity. And I think that we have demonstrated in this period a great deal of unity. And I am convinced that we will come out of this crisis stronger and with closer links with our stakeholders than ever before. And by the stakeholders, I mean the leagues, the clubs, the players, the national government, and also local authorities. We have, throughout this period, we have learned that the importance of dialogue, of compromise, but also the need and the benefits of seeing the bigger picture. So we demonstrated that when needed, football can stand together, and we acted in solidarity. We assumed our responsibilities to take bold decisions and to act for the benefit of all. And we did this even when this was not in our individual best interest. And let me take two examples. First, our decision to swiftly move the European Championship from summer 2020 to 2021. And number two, when we decided to suspend European club competitions to give priority to domestic club competitions so that the season could be completed. And by doing this, we helped a number of clubs throughout Europe to survive. So I'm confident that whatever issues we will face on the horizon, and there will be many across both the professional and the grassroots levels, if we remain committed to common values such as unity, financial solidarity, then we will ensure the long-term stability and prosperity and sustainability of European football.
Just a few minutes left to address Stefan on this as well. Stefan, what does resilience mean to you at the national level, at the European level, and for the presidency? You know, we have learned a lot of lessons from this crisis. We've talked and highlighted some of them today. But what does resilience mean? How do we move forward in a stronger position from this?
I'm deeply convinced that this COVID-19 crisis and COVID-19 pandemic means the biggest challenge for all the different structures of sports in all the EU member states, for the grassroots sports, for sports in schools, but certainly also for high performance and elite sports. And I'm also convinced if we are successful in in combating this crisis, in overcoming this crisis, in solving all these problems, I think we will be stronger than in the past. And as I said, I think in all the different EU member states, we have quite well prepared and well formed structures, and we want to enhance now the cross-sectoral coordination and cooperation in our presidency with regards also to the new EU sports work plan for 2024. So I'm deeply convinced certainly it's a tremendous challenge now for all of us and for all the different types of sports, but I'm also quite optimistic that we have the potential to be successful in the end.
Thank you. Now let's go to our 20-second roundup, your sound bites, to tell us what really matters to you for this phase going forward. So let's just check with our team who we're going to take first on this as well. We have the sequence lined up. I think we're going to start with Anna Kaiser, is that correct?
Thank you. You hear me? Yes, you hear me.
Okay, so 20 seconds.
Yes, thank you. Our sports clubs, they need economical support, but we all need sport. So we have all to do, all ages, we have to exercise and keep fit ourselves and have own responsibility as well. And that is the way how we can be happy and being well. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. But in that way, we are happy Europeans. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna Kaiser. Excellent. And Julian, your 20 seconds, your soundbite.
Well, what I'd like to say is that in these very challenging times, policymakers and the sports movements must work together on the European sports model, because it is a model where the sports ecosystem is designed to thrive together rather than grow apart, where purpose comes over profits, and where grassroots and professional are on the same team.
Thank you so much, Julian. Mark Tarabella, 20 seconds.
Usually, people think that Europeans are working in office and it's difficult to reach them. And I think that we demonstrate with the group sport of the European Parliament that we were very open to all stakeholders. In the former term, we organized some events and always with a great success, and also now, and we have to continue and to work with stakeholders, and not alone in the Parliament. Now we are outside, of course, remote meetings of each, but I think that we continue to be open to listen to you and to favorize better decision mechanism with the co-decision with the government, and we have to work together. It's my key message.
Thank you so much, Mark. And last word to Stefan. 20 seconds.
Thank you. In Germany, there is the saying, sports is the nicest side aspect. And certainly, normally sports consists of competition, winning, losing, the winner takes it all. But on the other hand, I think now there is a high potential in this COVID-19 pandemic because of making it clear how important sports is for oneself in conducting physical activity, but also for the potential of competitions. And so I think sports is not part of the problem, it's part of the solution of this COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you so much to Stefan, Anna Kaiser, Julian and Mark. It seems that sport in Europe at grassroots level still has a lot to play for. Thank you to your panel today. Let's go to our second Slido poll before we go to our second panel. So the second Slido poll, and in the context of the COVID-19 crisis, it's sport and physical activity. Is sport and physical activity in society more important than before, less important than before, or no change? So you have 30 seconds for this. In the context of the COVID-19 crisis, is sport and physical activity in society more important than before, less important than before, or no change? So we've had 636 participants today, 54 countries and 27 member states. It's a full house taking part today. Okay. And just still voting, 5 more seconds. And the vote's closed. Okay, in the context of the COVID-19 crisis, sport and physical activity in society, it's more important by a very long margin. There's 91%, if I can see correctly on the screen there. So it's more important, and if it's more important, then there are some obvious questions that need to be asked about what we do next as well. I'm going to talk a bit more about some of that in our next panel as well. So thank you to our first panel, and now let's meet our second panelists. Welcome back. Our second panel today is the impact of the crisis on growth and jobs in the sports sector and the possible ways to recover. And there must be lots of ways to recover. So let me give a quick introduction to our panel today. We have Tiago Brandão Rodrigues, Minister of Education in Portugal. Bom dia. Marisol Casado is a member of the International Olympic Committee and President of the International Triathlon Federation. Great to see you, Marisol. Manuel Poser, he's the Vice President of Adidas Global Government of FESA. And we also have Christy Simpson. She's the Secretary General of the European Observatory of Sport and Employment. Great to have you all with us today. As before, 60 seconds to kick off. Tiago, let's start with you. 60 seconds, sir. Elevator pitch.
Hello, good afternoon and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you and with my colleagues of this particular panel. Well, we know that this pandemic crisis is having a very strong and I would say a very negative consequences in sports across the entire world and specifically across all member states with the tremendous, let me say, disruptions in the activity of this particular sector, having negative long-term effects, for example, the impact on job offers in sports, also, and we know that a very negative socioeconomic impact, or also a tremendous impact in the access to sport as a fundamental right, specifically for the most socially vulnerable. And additionally, I would say that one must keep in mind that during this pandemic, many citizens have interrupted their recreational sport, reduced their physical activity levels, and also increased the sedentarism. And therefore, promoting physical activity in the society should be amongst the top priorities for the European Union in this particular sector. And just to finish, I think that it's of crucial importance that the EU Council starts to work to be carried out about combating the impact of COVID-19 in the sports sectors in the short, also in the medium and in the long term, and trying to contribute to its recovery and try to create resilience for all the predictable future situations. And during the coming Portuguese EU presidency, we will help sports to recover its central role in our communities, to structure our health and self-realization by having sports in everyone's life. And we always think that the sports values and best practices are inspirational, and we should always have them in the center of our lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiago. Marisol Casado, 60 seconds.
Okay, thank you very much for the kind invitation to be here. It's a great honor also for me just to be in the same situation that my boss, Thomas Bach, the IOC president, and I think he made a remarkable speech to all of us. Then it will be difficult for me just to add something what he already said. But the crisis has had and will continue to have a very considerable effects on the world, on society, on governments, and of course, on the Olympic Games, the entire Olympic movement. The postponement of the Olympic Games 2020 being the most visual impact that we have for the high performance sport. But some lessons we learned from all these crises. And I think this is the tools that we have now to recover from that.
Marisol, thank you. Manuel Pauso, 60 seconds, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner Gabriel. Thank you to the European Commission for providing sports this important platform. The coronavirus pandemic has posed a challenge to sports, to athletes, but also to healthy companies like ours at Adidas. In the short term, we are executing through these coronavirus challenges by really focusing on health and safety of our consumers, our employees, but also our partners, including athletes. We've also seen that the coronavirus pandemic has amplified some long-term structural trends. And those trends are a stronger focus on health and well-being, but also a focus on sports and athleisure wear, and lastly on digitalization. We've seen people really pay a stronger focus on physical activity. Yoga, running, but also body workouts with apps have become more popular and actually have lowered the barriers of entry to sports. At the same time, we've also seen that especially the lack of team sports has excluded a lot of people from sports, including children. Looking ahead, sports should really be a central element of national recovery strategies, because we've seen the triple positive role of sports. It's a preventive measure. During a crisis, it ensures physical but also mental well-being, and afterwards it helps healing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manuel. And also to Kirsty. How are you, Kirsty? 60 seconds.
Thanks, Brian. Hello, colleagues. Also, thanks to Commissioner Gabriel. It's a real privilege to be here today. So, 60 seconds. According to latest data gained from Eurostat by the European Observatory for Sport and Employment, EAC, who I represent today, indicates that total sport employment has decreased by 3.3% from 2019 to Q1 of 2020. So that's in itself probably not that surprising, but alarm bells should be ringing because COVID-19 only really started to impact during Q1, so we're only expecting that data to worsen. To provide context, total employment across the EU fell by 1.97% in the same time period. So sport has been unequally affected by the pandemic. The occupations most impacted upon in this decline are those that are categorized as ISCO 342. And for those who aren't very technical, that's better known to us as sport and fitness occupations. So coaches, fitness instructors. So the very people enabling our communities to be active are those who are seemingly in decline. So our collective challenge is twofold. Firstly, how do we work together? And collaboration has come up a lot this afternoon already to support the sports sector right now in the immediate time in terms of post-COVID recovery, business support and workforce development, but also how do we ensure that the future is bright for those young people out there who aspire to work in a really vibrant and inclusive sports sector? So EOSA, the organisation, as I say, I represent, really wants to help answer those questions. I'm here today and hopefully we'll all be a part of the solution. Thank you.
Kirsty, thanks so much. I want to throw in gender on top of that as well, because women are disproportionately affected by this crisis too. So we'll talk about that later on. Tiago, jobs, recovery and growth. That's the theme of this panel today. And you talked about putting sport front and centre of this recovery path as well. And Manuel, he mentioned the triple positive role that sport plays here as well. So Portugal takes over the presidency. Again, like Stefan as well, perhaps your well-led plans have had to be adjusted somewhat as well. But what's the Portuguese presidency going to do in terms of jobs, growth and recovery in the context of sport? Microphone.
Sorry about the microphone.
It's okay.
Well, we know that the Portuguese presidents, well, the entire trio, have undergone some adaptations, but despite all these challenges, we are making all the efforts to stick with the defined priorities, meaning innovation in sports, also sports diplomacy, and of course, we are going to speak a lot about the impact of COVID-19 in this particular sector throughout the semester. And of course, that we need to speak about jobs and we need to speak about how this particular sector is being affected by COVID-19. So here we know that when we speak a lot about sports and education and the health, we must speak about economy, because we know that the economic sector is being tremendously affected. So we need, during our presidency, to put a lot of evidence and highlight the role of sports in contributing to increase the employability and the economic and social recovery. And of course, we need to work also within the EU framework with our partners, and also with the ministers of finances and the ministers of economy, to cooperate in order to promote the stabilization and the support of employment in the sports sectors, trying to foresee and safeguard the economic and social value of volunteering, of course, on which the sports sector depends to a great extent. And we have seen in the previous panel how we spoke, or they spoke, about the volunteers and the economic and social value of volunteer. But of course, we need to include the sports sector whenever it's possible in the incentives and the mechanisms provided for our community support, and we are doing that in Portugal right now.
Thank you. Marisol, how did the IOC deal with this? What was, how does the IOC face a crisis like that, and what does it mean in terms of recovery? What's your role here?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I think, I think Mr. Bach already put it on the table. We have a slogan, is together stronger. Then I think it was very, very important. That's the kind of funding that we get from the Olympic movement. It was very clear, and it was just to help in all the levels of the Olympic movement. When I'm talking about all the levels, you have to understand that we are talking about 202 different national Olympic committees, and then 38 international federations, etc. And I think the model of funding is solidarity, and I think this is so important movement at this point, just to be able to arrive to all the sectors. Just the Olympic movement, of course, is a reduced world. This is very, very clear for everyone. But we are in all the countries, and through these aids that we had from the revenues of the Olympic Games, of course, is the way that we are trying to have in this moment.
Okay. Thank you. Manuel, for a company like yours, a sports company selling sports products as well, are things being good or bad? Are people buying stuff to use individually? How does the market look for you? Because there have been some serious structural changes as well. I think one of the figures, 50% of consumers planned to exercise more as well. Do you see a growth market here?
Certainly, especially in individual sports, we've seen quite an uptake. You said it, 50% of our consumers are planning to exercise more. We also see with home office, 75% of companies are planning more home office. So people actually also wear more comfortable clothes at home, and mostly also athletic clothes. So it's been actually quite an uptick for us on that front. Of course, what we also see is, and I mentioned this already, that team sports are declining. And not only team sports, but also a lot of these amateur clubs are losing income and cannot afford to buy their gear. So of course, that's also something we are observing. So yes, there's an uptick, and that's something we feel. People buy online. We see that in our e-com sales, but there are still some categories where we do see a decline.
Okay, thank you, Kirsty. And for your members as well, how do you get growth out of this when they're already on the back foot? The funding is limited. People would want to upskill and reskill, but what's on the table for them? How do you get that growth back and reverse that 3% that you mentioned earlier? and go further?
Very difficult, very difficult. And particularly because from 2011 to 2018, we were actually on a period of growth. There had been 20% growth in that period in the sector.
What was driving that growth, though? What drove the growth?
Variety of things, I think. More wealth in society, more time. And obviously, we've got lots of time now, but limited opportunity. And I was interested in your comment before, Brian, about gender, because obviously that decline isn't equally understood by different parts of our communities, or it isn't equally impacted upon across our communities.
How do you mean?
So, for example, we know that whilst across the EU, there are 51% of females and 49% of males. That's the general population. But in the sports sector, and in sport employment, we know that there's 46% of females, which has declined since 2011, and we know there's 54% of males. So in terms of our workforce alone, that's not just our opportunities for the public, if you will, but in terms of our workforce, we know that that's different to our overall European community. And that's something that we all need to sort of reflect on and think about how we might change that. I haven't got an answer, but that's something that we will probably all need to reflect on.
Let's see if we can get an answer for you. Marisol, on this as well, the IOC, how does the IOC view women in the economy of sport?
Very interesting question. Sorry.
That's okay, we can hear you.
It's okay now. Yes, I mean, the Olympic movement, I think in 2014, I have the honor to coordinate the working group, just trying to arrive to a more common balance, gender balance inside the organization. I think in this regard, the Olympic movement at this point, and after many years working in a slow pace, I think in the last 5 years makes a completely different situation. And we were doing a review all of the gender equality in the whole organization. Now we are implementing in international federations, national Olympic committees. But it is very interesting just to know, just as a small piece, that at this point in the Olympic Games already we have the same number, nearly the same number of men and women in competition. This is clear, and this is open, of course, a very important door for the women's in things like image, for example, because we impose a specific rule for the portrayal, and then this open more opportunities also for women to the possibilities to have more revenues for the image, etc., etc. Then I think this is where we are now.
Thank you, Tiago.
Sorry, only one thing, but
sure.
At the level of leadership, these points are really not an equal point, but we are working hard on that.
Yes, we are. Thank you so much. My daughters are holding me to account for every bit that I should do as well. So, Tiago, you're responsible for writing the business plan for next year, and Slovenia will take over 6 months after that as well. You're going to lay the foundation for this. So, in terms of sport, education, health, and the economy, and let's throw in gender as well, because many women are on short-term contracts and they're paid less as well, and their pension contributions are less. How do you get to reset some of these elements in the context of the recovery plan and sport as a mechanism for doing that?
Okay, trying to combine my first answer with this one, because both things are extremely important. I think that it's relevant to bring back sports to the European agenda and to the practices of the Europeans through new ideas, new changes, try to renew, shaping the way that sport is practiced, seen, organized, evaluated, and the way that it's affecting the role of sports in the entire society. And we know that this priority was established before, but we need to reset again what we are doing now. And there is a certain optimism in the contribution that the EU Council can have to the challenging of recovering and increasing the sector's resilience after this pandemic. But of course, when we speak about these three main areas, and you spoke about sports, but also education, health, economy. And we know that we have evidence supporting the importance role of sports in this set of areas. And this is also true when we are discussing the impact of the crisis on the growth and also in the employment that we spoke before in the sports sectors and the possible forms of recovery. Education, and I also have in my portfolio education, we know that sport and physical activity play a determinant role in the education of our children and youth. And indeed, in the Portuguese case, for example, physical education is one of the few subjects that are in the curriculum of youth from the first year of education until the last, as, for example, maths and the mother language, Portuguese. But we need to promote sports since early age. We know that are completely determinant for motor skills development and contribute to healthy lifestyles and to the society with, with values, respect, discipline, tolerance. But as I told before, within the European Union framework, we need to work with the health sector because we know that sport and physical activity can make an excellent contribution to the EU in the fight against this pandemic, but also raising the citizens' awareness of public health measures, trying to tackle the physical inactivity and promoting the healthy lifestyles and helping also to increase resilience and prevent a set of different diseases that we know that are closely associated with the physical.
This is exactly what I wanted to ask you about this as well, because there was a strong discussion before the COVID crisis about the merits of just focusing on GDP as the means, the measurement of success. But has COVID changed the sensibility? Is the quality of our life now maybe perhaps not as on the same footing as GDP, but has the quality of our life moved up the economic agenda in terms of what we aspire to, Tiago?
Oh, I'm sure that we are going to have natural consequences of this confinement and also the pandemic reality that we are living. Every single citizen in Europe, every single town, region, country, or the entire European Union, well, the entire globe will change the way that we face, the way that we interact with nature, the way that we live in society, the way that we practice sports. And of course, we need to work very closely with the sports organizations to try to compensate and make the group sports also and the collective sports important in the way that we are going to increase our capacity to deal with the post-pandemic. But of course, it's extremely important to work to put sports in the middle of this triangle: health, sports, and economy.
Super, thank you. We have a question exactly on this topic, which is why I'm interrupting you. I'll give this to Manuel first. You spoke earlier about the individual sports approach and the reduction of team activity. So this question comes from Therese Zintz, the University of Leuven, just up the road here from Brussels. Nowadays we notice an individualization of sport practices. Says Therese, as this phenomenon of practicing sport activities out of structures, clubs and federations is growing, how does the Portuguese presidency consider new ways of employment and volunteering in the sports sector? We'll bring that to Tiago in a moment, but Manuel, I'm asking you, how do you see the new ways for employment and volunteering in the sports sector? And because you come from the commercial side, how do you monetize this?
Well, I mean, we're really investing heavily in digital. So that includes not only our e-com sales, but really also apps that we provide, especially for running, but also training. We see a huge demand, as I said, for really working out at home, working out with connected apps, working with virtual trainers or in a virtual group. And we've seen really an uptick there in subscription and participants. And that, of course, is a driver also internally for jobs, but really also creates a larger community of people who want to engage in sports.
Let me just you're talking about digital economy here as well. You're talking about digital economy here as well. So it's not just about sports, but to make all that work, you need the app developers, you need the research, you need the innovation, and you need Commissioner Gabriel as well, who I assume is still on the conference. That's the innovation side is part of her portfolio as well. So can we layer in a green element as well? Europe has two big priorities at the moment: digital and green agenda. Do you see a sustainability shift in this as well? And how does Adidas view the post-recovery element in terms of sustainability?
I mean, sustainability has always been a pillar of our strategy, so that's not new. It is. We can see that in consumers, when they look for our products, especially during the pandemic, that they pay a special focus on sustainable products, so products that are from recycled materials, recycled plastics, etc. So there is a larger demand. Consumers are willing to invest more into good quality products. So obviously, that also encourages us to offer more products made from these materials, all the way to really recyclable products, and that's something we've been working on, and which will be an even stronger focus going forward.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to Christine Marisol in just a second, just to finish this question, which was asked to you, Tiago. What does the Portuguese presidency aim to do about this as well, and in terms of the grassroots support? And moving away from individual activities and strengthening the dynamic of federations.
Well, we need to work very closely to solve this the tremendous impact that the pandemic is having in the grassroots activities. But I strongly believe that in the context of the white paper on sports, and similarly to what happens in the youth sector that I also have in my portfolio, it will be very important to define a very dynamic European sports strategy, which can help us to point out strategic axes and sustain the work plans in the medium term and the role of the sports agents. And as I told before, at the European, national, regional, but mainly with the local authorities, always trying to safeguard the principles of autonomy and the principles of subsidiarity that we have.
It's a terrible word, I agree.
But of course, we strongly need that we adopt European Union strategies to the collection, analysis of information on this sports participation. And of course, I want to remind that from the first minute, the member states, within the scope of the European Council coordination, started working together to understand the impact of the COVID-19 and try to seek strategies to overcome this crisis. But it's very difficult. I need to be very sincere and transparent. The challenge that we face is so tremendous that, of course, we are not doing the right thing in the first moment all the time. Sometimes we are trying to find out the best way to make the next step. And this is a global attitude.
It's entrepreneurial politics, learning by doing, basically. For Kirsty, we have a question from Camila Conturni, UNODC. Camila asks, as for UNODC, salaries of sports professionals may be impacted due to reductions or delays in payments, and the economic situation places pressure on sport. Criminal groups and corruptors may seek to exploit the situation to gain influence at the damaging the most vulnerable. What can be done? This is a tough question. Kirsty, how do you prevent corruption when economic pressure is there? How do you ensure the transparency and the accountability? We heard about governance earlier in the previous session as well, and one of the speakers spoke about governance.
I guess we have to build in clear, transparent governance all the way through our structures, right from the grassroots all the way through to our elite level organisations. It's very difficult to always keep out that level of crime, and particularly when we're moving more into a digital world. The digital skills move faster than we're able to move, And I guess criminal gangs often have the resources to be able to get involved in those skills faster than other organizations do sometimes. That said, from a sports perspective, to me, this is about education, it's about awareness, and it's about raising those two things simultaneously alongside good governance, good transparent governance. And we'll minimize it. I don't think we can stop, but I think we can minimize corruption.
Thank you.
Very difficult question.
It's care for the audience. We're only the messengers here. So, Marisol, the same. Thomas mentioned this a little earlier too. From the IOC's perspective, he said that the IOC goes beyond the legal requirements in terms of its accounting as well. Are there lessons to be learned from national governments as well? What can be done to prevent this level of corruption and exploitation during this crisis and afterwards?
Well, I think the measures that we have in the Olympic movement, and I think in general in all the work about the measure of good governance is really high. This is why he says that it's beyond what let's say another organization need to pass. And I think this is a very important point now for all of us. All of us. When I say all of us, I'm talking about the international federations, which is my main. I think it's important for those that they didn't have a good governance and therefore they don't have some sources on the coffers just to pass the pandemic. It was very difficult. But for other ones but we were working very hard in the good governance and we arrived to this point just with our reserves. Then it was possible for us even to give some extra prize money in the few events that we have for the high performance athletes.
Okay. Thank you. And we have a comment and a question from Jerome Pero. He's the Secretary General of FESI, I think Manuel's organization also. FESI supports, he says, the intention expressed by the upcoming Portuguese presidency to bring together ministries of various sectors, financial and economic, and would be happy to join the discussion. Would it make sense to add tourism and health ministries, Tiago, to discuss aligning sanitary, travel and sports support measures? So would it make sense to add tourism and health ministries to discuss aligning sanitary, travel and sports support measures?
Well, no doubt about that. I strongly believe that, as I told before, that we need to put together, and who knows, in the Portuguese presidency, because everything is set up right now, but in the future, we need to put together at the same table the ECOFIN health and who knows education and sports. And in some countries, sports is within the portfolio of the Minister of Health. In other countries, is within the portfolio of the Minister of Education. But we need to see this set of questions with the different areas. To try to tackle the problems using different approaches, and most importantly, to have the supports of the ones that control the budget of the European Union. And at this respect, the dialogue with the European Union Parliament is also extremely important. To try to have the members of the European Parliament within these discussions. We need to send and to discuss with the national members of the European Parliaments about how important it is to have sports in connection with health, economy and education. And within the European Parliament, it's also important that we start to have an increase of the awareness of the importance of sports.
Thank you. This is our last question. You've been great on Slido today. We really appreciate it for all our audience online. Last question, then we're going to do the wrap up. This is from Spartaco Greco, is president of MSV from Italy. And it's a question specifically for Kirsty. E+ sport program has allowed the creation of a fundamental asset for the growth of the dual career among athletes. Is it possible to recognise these athletes' financial and professional tools to increase their presence in the job, and which actions need to be taken among member countries? So is it possible to recognise these athletes' financial and professional tools to increase their presence in the job, and which actions need to be taken among member states as well? Kirsty.
Great question. Obviously, we can learn a lot from sports. For those of us who are active, we recognise the contribution that has made to our lives. We're not all elite athletes. No, I'm not, definitely not. But I recognise the contribution that sport has made to me and my family. And obviously that's only magnified if you are an elite level performer. And those skills, those attributes, those values you take with you to the workplace. And in that sense, we should be making more of those values because we believe them to be positive. And how do we engage with employers to develop a workforce that can use those skills and competencies to best effect? So to me, again, this is about education, but maybe education of employers, as well as education of those athletes who can maximize those skills in the workplace and actually serve as ambassadors of sport and the sports sector in the organizations that they work in.
Thank you.
In terms of what member states sorry,
sure.
Go on.
No, go, Kirsty, go ahead, please finish.
I was just going to say, in terms of what member states can do, I guess it's build those connections from employers to education. So using universities, for example, as sources of the next workforce, just as an example.
Okay, thank you. Manuel, any comments on that as well, in terms of the role of high-paid athletes as well? We need ambassadors for sport. We need icons that drive the commercial side of this as well, and that commercial side helps fund the grassroots that we talked about in the first session as well. This is a lot of lines can be drawn here. So, how do you view this in terms of professional payments, Manuel?
Well, I mean, for us, sports and athletes have always been a big part of the Adidas family, also as as colleagues and employees. And when we sports is really the kind of the essence of what we're doing, and it's really incorporated in how we work together. So I think we as an employer obviously try to really have the spirit of sports in all we do. So I think we're probably, the whole sector is really an outlier here, or not the norm, I would say. But I can certainly encourage other employers to pick up, athletes and also the spirit of sports when they look into additional workforce, because that's that really makes you successful as a company, because it drives, it provides competition, but it also drives creativity, and athletes know how to play to win. So that's always a good addition to a team.
Thank you. The Portuguese presidency will no doubt play to win as well. We're going to wrap up. We have 2 minutes left in this part. Then we go back to Commissioner Gabriel for the closing remarks. Tiago, let's say I give you 20 seconds for your soundbite as well. What matters?
Well, just 20 seconds. I think that we cannot give up on sports. We must inspire ourselves and face this tremendous race to be able to win in the coming future, in the next future. All kind of challenges in our lives and also in our communities. And this is a global crisis that, despite affecting sectors in different ways, has affected all the sectors. And from the European level to each member state, sports will not be able to recover on its own, but necessarily together with the other sectors and giving the opportunity, as we spoke, for organizations to have access to the various support instruments available. Just to finish, this requires a global, an integrated vision that must start within the scope of the European Union coordination, and we count on our commissioner to do this fantastic job to coordinate the entire set of efforts that we are doing.
Nice elevator pitch. And now Marisol, also 20 seconds.
Okay. We have to recognize the crucial role of the sport in fighting the pandemic and as a low-cost, high-impact tool in the recovery. I think this is very important.
Thank you. Manuel, 20 seconds.
Look, through sport, people can live a healthier lifestyle. Through sport, people feel included, united, a sense of community. So let's make individual, but also team sports, professional amateur sports, the center of our recovery strategy. As we say at Adidas, through sport, we have the power to change lives.
Yes, we do. Thanks so much, Manuel. And last word to Kirsty, 20 seconds.
Okay, so for the survival of communities and improved physical and mental health, we need to rebuild all levels of the sports sector. We need progressive, agile organisations and an inclusive and appropriately skilled workforce to create a resilient sector for the future. We don't know what that's going to hold yet, but EOSE is ready to play our part, and hopefully you are too.
Yes, we are. Thank you so much. Let me thank Tiago, Marisol, Manuel and Kirsty for their super positive contributions this afternoon. A lot to be taken away, and good luck with the Portuguese presidency, Tiago, as well. So now we just got to close up and hand back over to Commissioner Gabriel in just a moment. So thanks for all of your Slido contributions as well. This was super important and filled up a lot of the content today, which is exactly what we were aiming for. So thanks for your attention to that. So now it's my pleasure to hand back to Commissioner Maria Gabriel for closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I've listened extremely carefully, and as always, I'm so much impressed by your engagement, by your energy, and by your creative and innovative ideas. So I would like really to say thank you very much. And believe me, your messages are listened, and not only listened. Together with you, my intention is really to transform them into tangible results, especially because that was raised by many of you, that we have a chance, that I'm a commissioner not only responsible for sport, but for education, for research, for innovation and youth. So we need really to transform this into a new impetus for our European model of sport. So now I would like really to say thank you for your participation and your contribution. And I would like to say again that we all fully measure the terrible impact that COVID-19 has on our sector. At the same time, today I heard how much solidarity, energy, and creativity there is in sport. And on my side, as announced, let me first share with you some key findings as well as future recommendations of the study we commissioned. Then I will inform you about our future activities and ambitions for sport. First, our discussions highlighted very clearly in which ways COVID-19 affected the sports sector, both from grassroots level as well as from professional angle. This impact has been quantified by the mapping study announced last spring. The full report of the study will soon be available on our website, and not surprisingly, the study suggests that the sector will be considerably affected during 2020 due to the current pandemic, regardless of the extent of COVID-19 measures taken. Although it is clear that negative effects increase with stringent measures. Lost revenue is a major issue. If organizations are unable to provide their services to the public, they cannot make ends meet. This includes considerable reductions in income from membership fees, licensing, participation, ticketing, broadcast, with its consequences on jobs. On top of this, the study highlighted cash flow difficulties. Sporting organizations have struggled to pay fixed costs like wages, rent, or contractual obligations. This could lead to halting activities and staff cuts in order to remain solvent. This means the risk of unemployment and insecure work. Employees, athletes, coaches, and other workers risk being laid off with subsequent loss of skills. Employees also generally feel less secure in their jobs. Freelancers, in particular, are especially vulnerable to income losses, and athletes have been affected by loss of income due to lack of events, as well as the financial implications of reduced sponsorship or prize money. Many organizations rely on volunteers to field their activities. As restrictions of movement are in place, these organizations lost capacity. All in all, the sporting services sector is estimated to shrink by about a fifth to a quarter. Overall, this applies to almost all member states in the same way. In fact, it is estimated to see their share of sport-related GDP decline by at least 10% in 2020. Faced with these key findings, the study proposes several recommendations that will be useful for our future work. First, continue to make funding available. The horizontal measures put forward at the very beginning of the crisis are crucial in this regard. And I encourage the sport movement to be active on this front and liaise with the member states to make sure these funds are also used to the benefit of the sports sector. Let me remind you these instruments. First, the Corona Response Investment Initiative. We need to see together with our member states how to give more visibility to the good practices and how to use this flexibility, because some of them are very well aware, but others didn't start even to use these funds. Second, we need to use better and more our SURE instrument, the temporary support to mitigate unemployment risks in an emergencies. We have 100 billion euros. It's designed to help protect jobs and workers, but we need here more concrete examples and more implementations for the sector of sport. Third, the temporary framework for state aids. It is precisely for this reason that we have invited member states to exchange information and share best practices on the measures taken. Second, we need to ensure that funding opportunities from the sports grant in Erasmus Plus are sufficiently flexible. We have all seen the result of this flexibility. This year, we received almost 1,200 applications, representing a record increase of 50% in comparison to the 2019 call. This clearly shows the success of our program, now in its 7th year, and these projects are needed more than ever because they support grassroots organizations at the basis of our European sport model and support sport and physical activity as key tools of prevention. Third, information sharing and dissemination across stakeholders. We are all in this together, and only together as a team will come out of this situation. And we all raised this. COVID-19 not only showed just how important is sport and physical activity for our citizens, but this is a real reinforced conviction now. And we must increase our efforts to support the practice of sport and physical activity in the EU. Exchange regularly, like we are doing today, is fundamental. This brings me to the final part of my intervention, our upcoming actions. In a couple of weeks, we'll be able to count on a powerful tool, the future Erasmus Plus program for the period 2021-2027. We already know that there is a substantial increase. What I would like to see is how we can increase more our support and have more initiatives to support the European sport organizations through cooperation partnerships and events. The same, the future program will be more open to international cooperation, for instance, with the Western Balkans. We are also developing mobility actions in the field of sport soon. Erasmus Plus will help us to contribute to the positive image of sport and the preservation of its integrity. We'll continue to be on your side to fight doping and match fixing, as well as to improve the governance of sport organizations. And next to Erasmus Plus, in a couple of days, the Council will adopt the future European Work Plan for Sport 2021-2024. And I'm happy to notice that this ambitious document is entirely in line with our priorities. It will allow us to undertake common work with member states and sport organizations on subjects such as sport and innovation. Thank you. That was a very strong message, Manuel. Sport and environment, gender equality, Marisol, or sport diplomacy. Resulting from the work plan, we'll coordinate 2 expert groups, one on green sport and another one on the impact of COVID-19 on sport. And of course, I count on you. And already we started internal discussions with my fellow commissioners to ensure a follow-up of the Tartu call for a healthy lifestyle. It will be called Healthy Lifestyle for All. The impact and the success of Tartu call launched in 2017 is undeniable, but that leads to high expectations for its successor. And the Healthy Lifestyle for All, in line with our priorities with the European Work Plan for Sport, will have larger scope than its predecessor, looking also at the sustainability of the sector and the innovation potential. Of course, our European Week of Sport will continue to be a key tool to promote all our initiatives. And yes, this edition, despite the circumstances, was a great success. And in particular, I would like really to underline here the involvement of our partners from Eastern Partnership and the Western Balkans. In the coming weeks, I will also put in place a high-level group on gender equality in sport that will have to produce recommendations in the coming year. We need to ensure a better representation of women in executive positions in major sport organizations. So I count again on your support and your ideas, your experience. We'll also continue to provide the sport movement with data, evidence, and useful studies. In a couple of days, we'll publish the results of a study on intergenerational sport. We also recently launched a study on doping. And as you see, we are not lacking ambition, and we'll soon have the financial and political tools to match this ambition. That is now the challenge. One major thing learned from this crisis is that sport is not only a leisure or an element of our well-being, it is a decisive instrument of prevention and health. In this sense, promoting sport this is in the interest of the whole society and economy. You see that is a lot on our agenda, but for these initiatives to be successful, I need your support. And only as a team, as a sport family, we'll achieve these goals. In this respect, it is important for me to have a regular dialogue with the sport movement and to strengthen our cooperation, following the example of the renewed arrangement for cooperation with UEFA, for example. I hope that more will come. I have already met many sport organizations and representatives and will continue to do so, either in a structured way, such as the European Sport Forum, or in a bilateral way. To conclude, I would like once again to thank all of you for your participation in today's conference, and more importantly, for your constant work and commitment to promote sport and physical activity for the benefits of all citizens. As Thomas Bach said, the values of sport are needed more than ever to have a human-centered and inclusive society. Our European model of sport is unique in this regard because it promotes values and solidarity. And this model needs to be preserved and promoted. Thank you once more. Stay safe and remember, be active.
Commissioner Gabriel, thank you so much. Such an enthusiastic response to everything that's been heard today. I think we're really talking about a resilient, healthy, ambitious sporting recovery. That's what's on the agenda from everything that we've just heard from the Commissioner. And clearly, your messages today have been taken on board by the Commissioner as well. And we're very grateful that she was able to stay for the conference as well. So thank you for that. Let me also thank our speakers today for the really much valued contribution, for the time they give up to be with us today, and also to our audience for the participation. You're really engaged. You still see comments coming in. These will be taken on board and disseminated also. So thank you for that. You may squeeze another one or two in just before I close right now. And if we need a team motto for Europe going forward, we could do worse than combining the individual and federation of sports with the Musketeers slogan of all for one and one for all. It's been my pleasure to be with you this afternoon. It just leaves me to say thank you and good evening.